One of the biggest problems in English language teaching is that we've been looking at language in the wrong way. In TESOL, we often talk about first language, we talk about second language, but translanguaging asks us to pause that thinking and to look at things a little bit differently. Are language actually separate in the brain? Are they in separate boxes? Or is there just one box of language in there? In this episode, we're going to talk about our understanding of translanguaging, why we think it's one of the hot topics at the moment in TESOL, and then discuss some of the key issues surrounding it. Okay, let's start. Ida, tell us, what do you understand by translanguaging?
It's a very good question. And I used to think, not long ago, that I know a lot about translanguaging, but actually just a couple of years ago, I started doing some research on translanguaging, and I realized that I didn't actually understand it fully. And oftentimes I used to confuse code switching with translanguaging. Like I have done a lot
Mm,
of both in my life as a bilingual, or if I dare say a multilingual. And I realized that maybe over the years, I've really moved on from code switching to translanguaging, meaning code switching, meaning that, I've really focused on, okay, sometimes I switch between my first and second language in certain contexts, but the main focus was really on the language itself. So okay, I'm going to say something in this language and something in that language. But over the years, I think the focus shifted from the languages to what I really how I am using them. So there was more focus
yeah,
on me as the user of the languages,
yeah,
rather than the languages themselves. And within a given context where there is an interlocutor with whom I can actually use my linguistic resources, what's the best way for me to communicate my intended message? So I realized that, yeah, I kind of, as an individual, have exercised both. And I realized that, oh, just language is different from code switching. And,
yeah.
but anyway, that personal experience, I've seen it a lot in my professional life, how my students do that in the past as a language teacher and now, as an academic, that there's a lot of code switching, translanguaging going on
Yeah.
among users.
Yeah, I think that the trying to understand the difference between those two terms is actually really helpful for trying to understand translanguaging. I don't know about you, but for me, if code switching assumes that there are two languages or more than two languages in the brain and those languages are separate, like you take that position, but translanguaging suggests that there is just like a repertoire of language in there, and you can use it if and when you need it. So for me, that's the fundamental difference in those two things. I'm wondering as I sit here and think about it. I think I've had the assumption that if you code switch, you kind of know that you're doing it. It's like, oh, I need to use this language here. I need to use this language here. But in translanguaging, you're just using what comes into your
Yeah.
what comes to mind as you try and really communicate with another person. I don't know do you agree with that, or do you have a slightly different understanding of it?
No, I agree. That's kind of the fine line between the two concepts, really, for me. Both just as a language user when I use it, and also, as someone who's been now doing some research in it, I realize that the focus shifts really when it comes
Yeah,
to translanguaging from the language itself, the code, because we go
yeah,
code switching, to really the user of the language and how they really use
yeah,
this constantly in time live. They use their linguistic repertoire with a focus mostly on the message
yeah.
to
Yeah,
get
and therefore the
across.
context matters as well, doesn't it? So if, say, you
Right.
are trying to get a business deal done, then it might be that you just need to communicate with the other person. So therefore, you just are going to use whatever linguistic resource you have to make that deal happen. But if you
Yeah.
are being tested by some rigid system, like it's not gonna work for you
Mhm.
because they could punish you. So the same thing could be
Yeah,
completely different in two different contexts.
absolutely. And one particular area of life or moments, one particular moment in life that I realized that, oh, I'm actually doing translanguaging was when I was expressing emotions. And I
Ah,
knew because like it's emotions, and I'm really, really focusing on the emotion itself rather than any verbal representation of that, right? And like you said, that's when I noticed how my brain really, like, in time and very quick, kind of picks and chooses, between whatever
Yeah.
linguistic resources it has, whether it's expressing feelings or even thinking about feelings, not even
Yeah.
necessarily verbally expressing them, but in my head, thinking about emotions. And that's been fascinating, that yeah, it's more than code switching.
It's more
Mhm.
than that. Yeah. Also didn't realize, and you just brought it to mind there for me, that my grandmother, when she was alive, she translanguaged and she used English, Gaelic, and Scots all at once in just her own way. And it was just the way that she spoke, and she didn't think about what she was doing. She didn't even think about those things as being separate languages for her. That was just within her repertoire, and she just used it a lot. I didn't realize that until probably fairly recently. It was just the way that she spoke.
Yeah, good example of translanguaging in time, yes.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
let's look at this paper that we had looked at. So,
Mhm.
guys, we looked up a paper on this and we've read this paper for you. This paper is open access, so you can have a read of it if you want. It's called Shifting from Labels and Languages to People, Attuning TESOL to Translanguaging Realities. And the authors are Seltzer and Rios. And this is a fairly recent paper, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so it's 2026, so it's a really new paper. And Ida, did you have time to have a look at this as well? I'm hoping so. And what
Yes.
were some key
And
issues you thought were in this paper that can help our viewers?
yes, yes, I did indeed. And there were lots of interesting insights in the paper. One particular one that drew my attention because I, like I said, have experienced that as an individual myself, as a language user who uses multiple languages. And I was like, exactly. So I had really that aha moment of, yes, that's really the case. And that's translanguaging. One thing that translanguaging does that perhaps is not so much focused in code switching is that it challenges the English only thinking, the English only
Yes,
mentality
yes,
in
so
the
much.
education in general, right? So I think as the authors well say, and that's something that I have as an academic notice a lot, is that there's this major issue surrounding English teaching, and that's that it's built around the separation of English from other languages. And
Mm,
the authors argue that TESOL cannot, we can't just we can't keep treating English as if it exists in isolation from from students' other wider language practices. And we see that a lot in our field when we
yeah,
talk about language use. It's so much focus on English in
yeah,
isolation, from other linguistic repertoire that students bring. And we live in a multilingual world, you know.
of course.
Uh, People, there's more mobility. People can travel around the world, maybe perhaps in comparison to the past more easily. There's a lot of multilingual families. So there are a lot of opportunities for people to become multilinguals. So a language learner of English most likely is carrying a wide linguistic repertoire with it, right? And
Yeah, there's so much.
how much are we aware of that in our classes? How much do we benefit from that? How much do we make our students aware of the fact that they can benefit from that in their
Yeah.
language learning, whatever it is? So I really like that argument
Yeah,
and that
and
observation.
it's also, if I can just jump in there, it's also like a really or it can be depending on your repertoire at the moment of language, a really good way to learn other languages through the commonalities between them. It can be
Yes.
another aspect
Oh,
of that, can't it?
100%.
Like,
I
how
have done
many.
it. I'm sure you've done it.
Yeah, of course. How much there's so much French influence in English that are they different or are they the same? They're actually just the same words which exist in Spanish and exist in Italian because they come from
Mm.
Latin. So there's a whole
Yeah.
ton of connections between these
Yes.
languages anyway. But if you take away then your knowledge and you stop thinking, well, I know this much English and I know this much French, and just think about the language that you know, it does really it's quite a change in thinking, isn't it? To think differently
Mhm.
about your knowledge in that way. But I
And-
think that it's happening all the time, translanguaging, and all of these languages are overlapping. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Yeah,
Were you going to say something else?
absolutely. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm just so excited about the topic. I really liked your use of the word connection. So how,
Mm,
these languages are connected. Because like another kind of point that the authors in the paper make is that translanguaging really shifts the focus from language, which is like language labels, first language, second language, to people. So they
yeah,
argue that labels like English language learners, right, can
yeah,
make students appear as, I don't know, deficient, because the
yeah,
authors,
yeah. Mm,
the focus is on what students supposedly lack. Whereas if you
yeah,
talk about users of different languages and that kind of connection that it brings between people,
yeah.
when you say, when you look at the word across different languages, it's pretty much the same. I was thinking about it the other day. The word for father, padra, father,
Mm,
pedar, lots of languages from different roots, but the word, sounds
copy.
similar in
Mm,
some languages. It's disconnecting people. So I like the
yeah,
idea of translanguaging really shifting the focus from putting linguistic labels on people to focusing on
yeah,
people, those who
absolutely.
carry repertoire. So I think, yeah, that the
Yeah,
point of connection is really
yeah,
an
and
important
in
aspect.
the classroom, like you already mentioned as well about like the English only classroom, I think you mentioned that this really like out of date idea that English that the first language is interfering with the second language. Like
Mhm.
that, I think that has held back a lot of English language teaching, and we need to put that one to bed. To be honest, it's kind of
Yeah.
like what we were talking about with AI in our previous episode. And if you guys haven't seen that, we'll put a link to that. Um, when is AI helping and when is it doing all the work? It's the same with that idea of the first and the second language, isn't it? So the right amount of it is actually really helpful. It's a resource. It's a
Ex-
linguistic
It's
resource
a
that you
resource.
should use.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. And you have the freedom to choose. It's like wealth. Whereas
yeah,
code switching is more like it's a deficit model. Oh, well, whenever I run out of words or, linguistic expressions in one language, then I switch to the other one. But
yeah, yeah.
translanguage,
Right.
my deficit
Yeah,
model, translanguage is all about abundance that I have. I can choose, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
from my linguistic resources, depending on, like I said, if it is about emotions, ideas, thoughts, what is it that we are communicating? I have that resource. So I really like that kind of more positive uh, outlook that translanguaging brings in how we use our
Absolutely. And that
resources.
comes up in this paper as well, where they talk about like the connections of language with identity, emotion, community, power, and these are all things which are we should allow our students to take with them into the classroom. Again, it's part of that rich resource that comes with language in the wider sense, with languages. Um, and I think that's a really important thing to have. Like, I always hated teaching pronunciation. I always hated
Huh?
teaching pronunciation. There's some things I
Yeah.
like I quite like teaching like syllables and stress and these things, but any kind of vowel sounds or anything which would de-identify my students, I always hated, because I always had I always just thought that you should be proud of where you're from. You shouldn't be trying to cover that up. Like, why would you want to cover it up? And even if you don't like it,
Yeah.
you need to own it. But
Yeah.
there should be
Absolutely.
no shame in any of that. Yeah, you're someone from Colombia speaking English. I think you should sound like someone from Colombia speaking English, because that's amazing. I think that's a great
Mhm.
way to sound. Like, what do you think
Yeah.
about
Yeah. Yeah.
that?
Absolutely. It's in fact it's connected to one of the points that the authors make in the paper, that it really, translanguaging asks teachers to examine their own ideologies. And I really reflected on my own experience of where I started my journey in my language learning, and the obsession that I had with accents, 15, 20 years ago, as a new language teacher, English teacher. And over the years, as I kind of got to know um other concepts in language learning, and in particularly concepts related to identity, I kind of started really shifting the focus to idiolect. And nowadays when I talk to
Mhm.
my students, now I don't teach English language now, but when I talk to my students at university who speak English as an additional language, and I can sometimes see that there. And I remember we talk about accents, and they're a bit worried about the kind of their own accent, and I'm like, that's your idiolect.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's original. That's how you speak English. I understand it. We can communicate. There's no barrier. It's perfect.
Yeah.
And so I can see how the journey that my understanding of my ideologies as a language educator has gone through, has shaped the way I understand translanguaging, and encourage my students to kind of exercise that, and
Yeah.
really like shift the focus from accents to
Yeah.
idiolects, to type
Yeah.
English. In this case, of we're talking about English, or any language that they speak. Yeah, rather than mhm.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And there's something in the paper as well, which I'm actually writing about in another paper at the moment, which is belonging. So there was a part where they challenged like the deficit views. This is the kind of stuff we've been talking about, but also
Yeah.
belonging came up as well. And I think that's really, really interesting because we think of belonging as being this, really something which is really important. I think you've written a paper about belonging in the past, Ida, maybe.
Yes.
And yeah, I think I read that paper. And the approach which I've been looking at belonging is belonging on whose terms, and how do you get to belong? And has there been a sense that the learner of English has to change themselves in order to belong, or they feel like they don't belong? Yeah. And
Yes.
there
Yeah.
there's a lot of facets to belonging which I think need to be unpacked. It sounds like a great thing, but if you can't be yourself, is belonging that great, or is it actually quite just exhausting?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where, like in translanguaging context, it kind of connects language with identity, emotions, community, and power. Very, very important
Yes.
concepts that
Yes.
oftentimes overlooked when there is too much focus on the code rather than the actual
Yes.
users of it. And what that means really when they choose the
Yeah.
linguistic tool, to express themselves as
I,
beings,
I,
as
I
humans, to identify
yeah,
themselves with.
totally
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, no, I
Mm.
totally agree. Let's move on then, and let's think about maybe some questions that we thought up about this issue. A couple of things I had thought about, and this relates to an episode that we had in the channel just recently about am I speaking correct English, which we can also link to. And a question I had thought of was, I'm just going to look at my notes. How do ideas about proper English or standard English shape teachers' views of multilingual students? So going back to this idea of like standards and speaking properly, and and how much is that really holding back some excellent communication through translanguaging? So that's one thing that I had thought about. How about you? Was there any kind of questions that the viewer can think about going forward?
There is actually a question. I've got a few questions, but there's one particular question that I um, often find myself discussing with my students, with my TESOL master students, and that's when we talk about translanguaging and all the kind of benefits of it. We often wonder, how can translanguaging support language learning,
Mm,
without making teachers feel that language development, in this case English development, is being neglected. So there's always this worry that they have, that, oh well, okay, but in the context of, in learning context, the focus is still to learn a particular language, right? So to what extent can we use translanguaging so that that learning is benefited, it's not neglected, that the language
yeah,
itself that is being
yeah,
is not neglected? So I think it's a very good question to kind of know the limit to
yeah.
that.
And it's a very practical question that everyone can think about who's teaching. And I would recommend another episode of ours, which is about the zone of proximal development, because is it really
Uh-huh.
about ZPD and how you get your learner from being dependent to being independent, and how do you scaffold that, and how does a linguistic resource help them to learn English with the ZPT? Maybe that is something which can be of assistance there. So
Yeah.
let's just think about wrapping up the episode then. Do we have any kind of PDF for our subscribers?
Yes, we actually have a PDF for this episode as well. So we have put together some questions for you to reflect on, whether you are an ELT TESOL practitioner or you are pursuing a degree in TESOL. These are the questions that you can use to reflect on the topic of translanguaging, but you can also use them if you are thinking of a dissertation around the topic for your master's program, or if you are considering a PhD project in relation to translanguaging. So we've put together some questions for you to think about in a PDF. And if you'd like to have it, please comment translanguaging. And of course, if you have got any experience, any reflection on translanguaging, add that to your comment as well, and we'll send you the PDF.
Awesome. And so, just some key takeaways from this discussion, I think, is that translanguaging is really asking us to like rethink some basic assumptions that we've got about language and about good teaching. And it's also asking us to think really carefully about our students and to help them bring their full linguistic resources with them to the classroom and apply them so that we can make our classrooms as rich as possible. And if you think this episode has been engaging, there might be some other episodes that you want to check out. You might want to check out our episode, It's an Explainer on Self-Directed Language Learning, which I think goes together with translanguaging really well. You can also watch our episode on digital literacies and AI. Also, that might also interest you. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.